Welcome back, everybody. You are on another episode of the Decentralized Tech Livestream. I'm really excited about today's topic because I think that you have an opportunity to learn a hell of a lot from this conversation. We're going to be talking about crypto liquidity and market making. And these seem most people to be a little bit of an arcane subject. But over the last year, it's something that I have really aspired to become, at least, if not an expert, more of an expert in. I think the true experts, they do this job every single day. But I was really encouraged early on, as in our crypto project, to think about liquidity, market making, and how important it was, and also how risky it was to do it the wrong way. So we're going to talk about that. I've met founders, by the way. I met one founder who told me that the wrong market maker cost him $1 billion. So this is an actual real thing that can happen. So if you don't even know what these subjects mean, first of all, strap in. You're going to learn a lot today. You're going to acquire an enormous amount of alpha about how this works. And it's going to be relevant to you if you're a crypto founder, if you are someone who's close to a project in the community and you want to understand what market making is going to mean for a token launch. It's going to be important if you're an investor and you want to know what's going to happen when that token goes live and how it's going to be traded and how liquidity is going to be provisioned for it. So this is a really important topic for everybody in the crypto ecosystem, and one that, frankly, I find that virtually nobody actually understands, including, by the way, most crypto founders. Like, I found that most crypto founders are like, oh, you're a market maker? I heard that I needed that. I checked the box. Now I've got a market maker for my TG. Like, literally, that is my experience of like what most crypto founders say. Now, the ones who have done more than one crypto launch are not like that. They are almost always invariably saying to me, if I only knew then what I know now, I would have done things so differently. And frankly, this has scared the living shit out of me. So I've just had to invest in learning. So on that subject, I'm really excited today because I met Paul back at Token 2049, I guess a couple months ago now, and he was right outside a DPIN Day event. It wasn't called DPIN Day. It was like Aether's DPIN event. So Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network, and a lot of founders and people that are close to building DPIN projects were there, including myself, because Beamable is launching a DPIN project, and we're going to do a token launch later this year because that's what's going to power the staking, the provisioning, the everything really on the network. And the token is going to need a market maker, and I was pleased to meet Paul there and start to learn. So we're going to start, I think, introduce Paul. I would love to hear him share a little bit about his personal journey through life, through crypto, to where he got to this. And then we're going to dive deep on this subject. So we're going to start simple for those of you who are just learning some of these concepts. But if you're not at the very beginning of this, stay tuned, because we're going to try to get as deep as we can and really talk about some of the subjects that affect the entire ecosystem. So last comment before I turn it over to Paul. We do this live so that you in the community can ask questions, right? So I see already there's a whole bunch of comments coming in. Great to have you all here. We really love your questions. First of all, it makes my life a lot easier to just start queuing up questions from you, the community. But I just love to see the engagement, and you guys are a great community, and I know that you're here to participate. Many of you are here for the code that we're giving out. The leaderboard has been really active with these recently. A lot of you are coming and joining these so that you can participate in that. I will be releasing it later in the show. So you just got to be listening. You got to be there when I mention it. And then there's that 2-minute window to do /claim in our Discord and get the points towards the leaderboard, which will later translate into the airdrop that we're doing at a little bit after TGE. Okay, without further ado, Paul, why don't you introduce yourself? How did you get to this place in the crypto industry that you are in today?
Well, how much time do we have? No, it started for me. I always say I've been in crypto since 2016, 2017, around that time, late 2016. But to be honest, that was just years of throwing away money at stuff I had no idea about. I typical, let me buy Bitcoin because I heard about it and not let me actually dive into understand what it is. scenario. Had some fun with it, made some money, lost it all again, and that's when I kind of left it to the side. Fast forward 2021, I've been living in the Middle East for a couple of years by that time already. I was actually working as a project manager for a company that develops restaurants in airports. So if you ever fly to Dubai or to Doha, on the airports, you probably will eat some food there in a restaurant I worked on. But that was before my crypto journey started, basically. Long story short, I'll leave that part out, but it came to working 14, 15 hours a day, back to working regular hours when I was over in Qatar, in Doha. And that's when I was in the evening hours. I was just sitting there at home, and I was like, yeah, I didn't really build a social network up there yet. So what am I going to do? And that's when I kickstarted playing video games. And after a month, I was like, yeah, this is not going to help me either. And that's when I dove into seeing, what's out there. What can I do? What can I spend my time on to learn something, to earn something? And that's when I discovered NFTs. I just Googled what are NFTs because I heard about it. Took me, I guess, a month to realize the majority of people in that specific niche of the industry were very stupid, unprofessional, and immature. Within a week, I won my first couple $1,000 on giveaways or fan art competitions that were very easily to rig and to win. And yeah, just a funny experience altogether. But I quickly noticed, like, hey, a lot of these projects that are building something serious, they need marketing, and that's not something. It felt like, at least to me, that a lot of projects were doing. So that's when I decided, let's see if I can do this. And I got in touch with a guy who had an alpha group, so to say. It was called Dre's Empire back then, and he had like 3,000 people in his Discord group. And I started writing about marketing in NFTs and about alpha in the NFT space in general. And within no time, the community grew to up to 100,000 people. The calls that we were posting actually worked out. I mean, if you put our hundreds of hours of research and stuff, you kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. So we were calling out the right NFT projects to buy into. And within a month or so, I got the request to do the first marketing gig. And I basically earned like 2 times my year salary in the first 24 hours, which was like, what the fuck's happening? Because I had quite a good salary, in my opinion, already. So yeah, the day after I quit my Web 2 job, and I decided to move back to Dubai. I had lived in Dubai before a couple of years. I had some friends there already, so I figured, I want to go back there. And that's when I started to be full-time in Web 3. Yeah, I just, kickstarted things with working with projects on the marketing side, alpha calls, getting them involved with some of the creators that were around back then. And after the NFT journey kind of ended, well, I mean, the market ended, let's put it that way. NFTs weren't hot anymore, so I figured let's move my attention to crypto projects. I quickly noticed, by that time I was running my own marketing agency, and I was like, yeah, I'm just doing sales, right? And I'm not a big fan of sales. Actually, I was quite annoyed because I was doing sales. I got in a client. I gave all the fun work and the creative work to a team. And then I was back to doing sales. And I was like, I want to do the fun and creative work and not do sales. But it's kind of impossible to find salespeople because they probably start doing their own stuff, right? If you're good enough to sell something in terms of marketing, you're good enough to get a team around you to execute on the work. So I decided to stop with that and actually focus on working with dedicated projects, one-on-one, become CMO of projects or marketing head or whatever you want to call it. And I started with a company called, first I was the CMO at Board Puma, a company in the Middle East, an agency as well. But they worked with a lot of Web 2 companies to bridge them to Web 3. Super interesting. Did like a clothing collection, sold 2 million clothing pieces and only like 2K NFTs. So super funny to see the differences. And then I worked with a company called ArtFi, which fractionalizes art, so to say. And they've been building quite extensively now. They're mostly on the Sui chain. But I left them, I think, 2 years ago already. And by that time, it was... I guess the summer of 2023 when I got in touch with the team at Reform. It wasn't even called Reform back then. There was no Reform. The plan was there, but it didn't have a name yet. And that's where I eventually became CMO. I actually onboarded there just to manage some KOLs for them because they needed some help. And yeah, within a month, we both noticed like, okay, you need more than just some KOLs. You need someone to think about this marketing side of things. And it's pretty interesting because I'd never heard of market making before when I kickstarted there. So that has been an educational journey for me as well. And now we're here. Since a year, or since 2 years, I work as a CMO at Reform. Since about a year, I host spaces on my own profile, the Paul's Penthouse shows. Jon is a regular guest there nowadays. We talk about a lot of different topics. We have a deep end show, we have an AI show, we have a show about the news of the crypto week, it's going pretty well altogether. So I'd like to do more of these type of shows. So happy to be here as well today, and let's see how far we can dive in. I would say you mentioned a lot of cool things already in the intro, Jon. So let's see how far we can get.
Yeah. So first of all, everybody should just follow Paul and keep track of the Paul's Penthouse talks. I've been on Wednesday and Friday ones. They're both great. So tune in. They get really big audiences. There's great guests on them, and it's a great educational resource. So speaking of education, let's just begin from the basics. What is crypto liquidity? I mean, I could even just ask, what is liquidity? And beyond that, what is a market maker's role within that?
Yeah, so basically, in order for anyone to trade on a financial market, there needs to be liquidity, meaning there needs to be someone who buys or who sells against what you do. If you want to buy, someone needs to sell. If you sell, someone needs to buy it, right? And I'm just trying to explain that in a very simple way. So there's I'll keep it as broad as possible because there's always exceptions to the basic rules, right? But as broad as possible on decentralized exchanges, so on Uniswap or wherever you see, there's liquidity pools. So basically, what a project does, it puts funds in a pool, and then that balances out basically, and it automatically does the buy and sell orders based on that pool. That's why it's so important to have liquidity in those pools and to make a project tradable. On centralized exchanges, this is done by market makers. So basically, what we do is very simply said is we make sure that if you want to sell, we will buy, and if you want to buy, we will sell. Now, that, of course, sounds too simple to be true, and it's kind of course, true because there's a lot behind that. But yeah, that's purely what liquidity is. So if your token has good liquidity, it basically means that anyone can trade on your token. And that also means, of course, where then and we'll dive into that a bit more, I guess, but that small sell orders or small buy orders don't directly push a token high or very low, right? There is a certain amount of depth in the token with the right spread to it, and that's basically the work of a market maker.
So we could imagine a world without a market maker, and that one would be where people could maybe enter all the crazy prices for they're willing to buy or sell at. And then when someone comes along and enters a new order, like a market order, you just have to wait for someone to come along. So for tokens that are new, especially, you might wait for a while, right? Like maybe there isn't anyone willing to sell you the token even at a current market price. So the market maker actually allows someone to enter a market order, and I'll get a fair price for what it is right now based on what you're seeing in the marketplace. You quote, the market maker quotes the price back to the exchanges, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So what we do is we put orders in the order book of exchanges, buy and sell orders in like 2% around the current price of the token. And we make sure that there's always, because a lot of exchanges have requirements for this. So in that 2% depth, there needs to be at least like $2,000 before it moves 2% of the token price, so to say. So that's at least a minimum that's needed. Of course, there's more quoted, but that's higher up then. And there's a lot of different things you need to look at and why it's so important to have a market maker, right? Because actually, when you said this, it triggered something that I don't speak about often, but also, imagine a project doesn't have a market maker. it could happen that somehow you're new to this industry, and you're like, hey, let me buy $10,000 worth of a token, right? You think like, oh, it's a respectable company or something like this, and there's no proper order book behind it. You press buy. It might be that you autofill in very high slots, and that you buy a token at a super expensive price because there's simply no orders in the order book, right? So your first $2,000 is filled in like a 2-3% range, but then suddenly it jumps like 400% to where the next order is. So yeah, that side also, a market maker makes sure that it's a safe environment to trade for end users, so to say, by ensuring stability in the token price and in the liquidity that's available.
Right, because in an order book market, you could have something where the token is like there's a current seller willing to sell at $1, but the next, you can imagine a world in which the next seller will only sell for like $10 or something. And if you execute a market order in that environment, you'll get your $1 first filled by whatever quantity that person has. And then a guy comes along and thank you very much, I'll sell you it for $10. Doesn't mean that that's really what the value of the token is at that time. It'll just jump all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, I expect the token to be 99 cents, as you said, and someone sells it for $1, you'll be like, yeah, okay, sure, 1% difference. I'm fine with that. So I take that, and I take that order. But now if you say, hey, let me buy for $11 worth of that, you expect to get 11 tokens, but actually you only get 2, because there's nothing in the order book there besides that $1 token and that $10 token. And that's, of course, something that you want to prevent. Obviously, there's a lot of tools already in exchanges built in to prevent this from happening. There's ways how you can put your orders in there, but still, this happens to a lot of new people in the industry. And it's not, of course, it's in the end the fault or the mistake or the problem of that individual. But as a project, you want to make sure that your project, is good in any possible way for any end consumer of that project. So it's just one of these things you want to have and be sure of for your clients or your users or your community.
And then what does a market maker do on a moment-to-moment basis to support that? So there's going to be various orders coming in from the exchanges for buys and sells, but what are you doing in between all of that to manage the liquidity?
Yeah, so I think there's two aspects where we can look at, right? So as a market maker, there's 2 different things you can do. I'm mostly talking from the reform perspective, but this is in general also how it goes. So on one side, we do the market making for designated projects, so designated market making, which is ensuring the liquidity and the orders for a specific project token. On the other hand, what we do is we actually do market making for the crypto exchanges. Very simply said, right? So what we do is we are providing liquidity to the exchange, liquidity provision, and we do that through high frequency trading. So basically what this means is we build an order book on some of the more active trading pairs, name a Bitcoin to dollar, a Bitcoin to Ethereum, and Ethereum to $1, and Ethereum to Bitcoin, or what, right? These sort of pairs, say top 50 tokens, top 100 tokens. That's also funny. Those tokens don't have a market maker because they're getting market made by the market makers automatically. They don't have to pay a market maker or work with a market maker because all the market makers are already trading on those pairs. Because it's really a competition between algorithms who can drive the most, the sharpest and the fastest orders in order to take very little profits all the time. So on that side, for example, we do between 500,000 and 2 million trades per day, which is all automated, which is just buying Bitcoin and selling Bitcoin all day long, right? So we build an order book of 1,000 orders, buying and selling at certain prices. And if we buy at 100K, we'll sell at 101K. That's $1,000 difference, but at $100,001. So just with a $1 profit, right? That triggers a sell order for us as well. But because you have 1,000 orders on both sides of the price right now, that kind of fills your inventory all the time. So yeah, the moment Bitcoin goes up, it slowly starts liquidating all the Bitcoins that were bought up at a certain level below that. And then whenever the Bitcoin price goes down, it starts buying back into that. And that happens at a very, very large scale, but also very fast. And you got to make sure your algorithms are fast enough because you're battling against other market makers. So that's one side where basically the market makers drive most of the liquidity and volume in the crypto market. Then on the other side is where we do the liquidity provision, so to say, so the designated market making for projects. And that's what we were discussing already earlier, where we help projects make sure that their token is tradable, that they meet the exchange requirements, et cetera, et cetera. And then I don't know if that specifically answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's a good start. I think we could maybe probe the whole topic of liquidity a bit more. Suman has a nice question from the audience. Well, it's really a comment first about NFTs and crypto liquidity, but I think it actually raises the broader question of like these different meanings that sometimes happen around the word liquidity. So sometimes I hear people talk about the word liquidity, and what they mean is how much money is there out there for these assets. Like if there's a certain pile of money that's available, people describe it as greater liquidity is available for those assets. I think that is a fine version of what liquidity can mean, but we're kind of also talking about something else. In traditional finance, liquidity is sometimes defined as how close to the fair market value of the asset price do you get when doing a transaction for it. And the less liquid it is, there's a greater divergence. So for example, in a private company stock, which doesn't have an exchange, you may be paying a deep, deep discount relative to the fair market value of that stock, only because there is no market to trade it on. In crypto, if the price is jumping all around, like we were describing earlier, because you went from the $1 price to the $5 or the $10 price, then you're not really paying fair market value just because that happened to be the only person at that point in time who would be willing to trade with you. That doesn't really reflect fair market value. So liquidity is that delta, at least this is kind of how I think about it, which is the delta between fair market value and what you're having to pay in a particular transaction. Am I thinking about it right, Paul, in terms of like,
yeah, you're spot on with that. Absolutely. I mean, it's just, there's so many different ways how you can word it, right? I think what Suman is mostly saying is, of course, the small liquidity compared to the crypto market you see in the NFT market. And that's obvious. That's logical because there's less people, there's less tokens that are for sale or bought. And indeed, as you said, it's all about how fast and can I sell to the most accurate price or buy on the most accurate price. And I think, if you just look at think with liquid to something that is in a liquid, right? It's like, it's very accessible. That's always my little remember thing. Like it's very available. It can go anywhere because it's liquid. And it basically means indeed there's always a possibility for you to buy or sell, right? The market is liquid at the preferred price. And then with NFTs, there's often a scenario where you can't even buy. I mean, if you go to some of the top tier NFT collections right now, they might not even be available because there's only like 50 pieces out there and the 50 people are like, I'm not selling. So there's no liquidity because nobody is selling it. So you can't buy it. And of course, that there are skills to that where you are, fully liquid whenever there's, an order, buy or sell order available at any moment in any time. Like Bitcoin is basically always liquid. And something like these NFTs is not. And then what we try as a market maker is make sure you are as liquid as possible on your token.
Andre had an interesting question, which we can also go back to the distinction between centralized exchanges and decentralized, which you touched on really briefly, but maybe to help everyone understand, there's a big difference there. So on centralized exchanges, market makers are the ones who are trading in and out of the system and even providing connective tissue between the different exchanges, like arbitrage and pricing between different exchanges. Liquidity pools, I'm pretty sure Andre is referring to AMMs, automated market making, which happens on dexes like Uniswap and so forth, where the public actually can just go in and contribute capital to a liquidity pool where you have a token and usually then either USDC or ETH, something like that, that's commonly traded. And you can enter into these liquidity pools and you can earn some income from the transactions happening in the liquidity pools. But there's a big difference between like AMMs and then effectively the active trading that happens at a market maker. Can you just maybe distinguish that a little bit and then answer Andre's question about like what are the risks of these AMMs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to start with his question. I think it's quite broad, right? And I think there are some technical aspects to which I wouldn't dare to give a proper answer to because I'm not too certain about that specifically. Because there goes a lot. We from Reform side only do market making on centralized exchanges, so I've also not really dived into the whole point of decentralized market making, so to say, or decent market making on decentralized exchanges, which often is happened by automated market making. But obviously, I think there's two sides to it. I guess on one side, liquidity pools, they are decentralized, right? And liquidity on a centralized exchange kind of is not, because it's run by people or bots, but still people are behind it. And I think it's very interesting to have it that way, but at the same time, it makes it very vulnerable, right? Because there's nobody there's no fail-safe, there's no help behind it. There could be, I don't know, malicious developers, rug pulls that directly take the liquidity out. So say you provide liquidity to a token, you're like, hey, let me, as you mentioned, John, give my ETH or my USDT or my SOL, whatever, to a liquidity pool. Sometimes, if the smart contract is malicious or something, you can lose that money. At the same time, if you are in the token and you bought a certain token, a developer can take the liquidity out because the liquidity might not be locked in that pool. So there's a lot of things to know when you basically look at liquidity pools on decentralized exchanges. And I guess those are the risks, right? Understanding, is it locked? Often is it, I think, is it burned as well as one of these things you want to look at. And then again, not my area of expertise, so I just want to be mindful and not say stuff that I can't verify 100% certain.
Yeah, well, I'd say for Andre, like there's one big difference between an AMM, an automated market maker on these liquidity pools that you can find in places like Uniswap and so forth, is a risk called impermanent loss. So if there's a big price change in the token, you can actually lose principal, meaning you can lose value just by participating in that liquidity pool. Some people hope to make up the impermanent loss by just having lots of trading income, and if the trading income is high enough, then maybe you can. But that's a risk because because AMMs, they're pretty simple instruments. They don't have like an active trader sitting there or an AI algorithm that tries to figure out how to price things appropriately. What it has is it's really just pots of capital with an exchange, and the exchange is run by an algorithm, and the algorithm is very simple. So, that approach to market making is what kind of results in impermanent loss because it's just a side effect of the algorithm that's used. I know that Uniswap is working on things that kind of restructure it in a way that doesn't have that, but that would be one difference versus what you do in your business is actual active trading. Now, you referred to high frequency trading and things like that. High frequency trading is, a computer is there making decisions. And whether it's a human or an AI or an algorithm, there are decisions being made about buying or selling at any given time, which is a little bit different than an AMM, which is it's just like a machine. You put capital in and it just does transactions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, of course, through AMM, it's more, nobody looks at it anymore, right? It runs and then it runs and that's it. And indeed, there can be situations where it doesn't run perfect or where circumstances change, etc. And with the regular market maker, it's always, if I look at what we do as a company, it is automated, right? High frequency trading through algorithms that are AI driven. But there's always quants sitting behind their computers checking this 24 hours a day. There's someone looking at a screen to make sure, your API key is still connected, or your order book is still full in the right way. There's no certain pumps or whatever. It happens a lot that on projects, you put $2,000-3,000 in an order book for 2% depth. So meaning if $2,000-3,000 is bought, the price goes up 2%. And suddenly within a couple minutes, 100K is dropped into a token, right? And that's often people that try to trick the market maker and trick other orders, but then we go into a very technical, competitive niche of the market making. But and so you always want to have someone on there to make sure that doesn't happen, and that's, I guess, one of the bigger differences as well compared to the automated side. And then of course the risk, as you already mentioned, Jon, as well, with the permanent loss explained, is of course if you put ETH and USDC in a pair and the price of ETH doubles, but your money is locked in that liquidity pool, it rebalances because it wants to balance out that ETH and that USDC. So suddenly, if you take your money out, you have less ETH because it balanced it out. And that happens automatically, and that's just money you can't get back. So there's a few risks to the side of providing liquidity. There's a few risks to the side of trading with liquidity pools, as I mentioned, rug pools, malicious smart contracts, or developers where you need to be mindful of what they do. So it's tricky, and that's why I think you still see a lot of volume being on exchanges, because it's just also a sort of safety for people, right? It feels, I guess, a little bit as if you're working with a bank rather than a shady dealer on the corner of the street. And that's the difference between sexes and dexes, I guess.
I think DeFi is the future, but we're a long way to make that stuff easy enough for people to use. Like, let's face it, like people just want to go into their Coinbase app and it's all like easy, and you don't have to worry about a smart contract draining your entire wallet. like I think I've heard from some people who are sort of saying, well, this is the last real cycle that sexes are going to be important. I'm pretty skeptical of that. I think they're going to continue to onboard so many users, and the average user doesn't really care about libertarian concepts of self-sovereignty and be your own bank. And like, I think the leverage in crypto is from the fact that you can do those things, but I would not expect the vast majority of the market to actually do those things, because the UX is just too hard. Like, it's still way too hard. The easiest crypto wallet in your web browser using like Web3 APIs is still way harder than anything else you can do for any other financial asset, I think.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I mean, we spoke about it a few times on the different shows we did, of course, but I think in general, and it's even for me, like the whole decentralized part, of course, I like it. It's one of the reasons I initially got, into the whole crypto thing. But on the other hand, I would prefer governments putting in regulations where they at all times know what wallet is yours, at least so they can track what you do, like they're tracking your bank accounts now, so they know how much taxes you need to pay. But we're all on that new network, and we're all evolving into the new internet, so to say, rather than fighting against it and ending up with CBDCs where they have full control over everything. Because at least when there's a blockchain behind it, they can see it, but they can't control it, right? So I guess, do you really need that? That full decentralization? I think it's a very small amount of people that actually care about that, and they have a loud voice in our industry because that's the most. All of them are in the industry. But yeah, I think once you see mass onboarding through very simplified apps and things like this, once the bank goes on blockchain, but your app stays the same, you don't even notice it. That's when most people will come in, and this will be such a small percentage of people that care about the decentralization part of it.
So I see questions coming in from the audience about things like AI and how that's going to affect things like market making. But before we can get to that, I want to first talk a little bit more about some of the problems with it, and like what are things that a founder should be thinking about. And for some of you that are just learning about how this works, like this may be a real eye opener, because market making doesn't just happen magically. Like, as a crypto founder who's going to launch a token, you have to go and find a market maker who's willing to work with you and can do it on terms that make sense for you as well. And there's a little bit of a checkered history in how that's actually played out in the industry. So let's start with like, what is the journey for a crypto founder? Like, what do they have to do to get listed, just purely from this standpoint and from a market making standpoint? And what are some of the ways you're aware of that market makers in the past have, and we don't want to say they've always been bad or anything. Obviously, plenty have been great for project teams, but there's been some negative behaviors as well. And we should maybe identify what some of those risks have been for people.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the stuff you have mentioned in the intro is super valuable here, right? Because indeed, the case is that most project founders, most people that work in the industry don't know what market making is, how it works, why they need a market maker. They just know they need one. And they end up having this conversation with a smooth sales guy, and he sells them the market making. And I don't want to go into a story where I bash on every other market maker out there, but basically, to the point, what happens most of the time is that the market maker sort of it's a cowboy land, right? They have a free game. They can do whatever they like, and the project probably doesn't even know it's happening. And it's just very difficult to see for project founders what is needed along the timeline, right? And there's many different examples, but obviously with your listing, obviously when you go live, your first week, super important. But also after that, right? You need to make sure there's always enough liquidity. You need to make sure. So let's start at the start. Let's run through these phases. I think it's pretty interesting. So to be honest, and as I said, I don't want to bash on other market makers. I think most of them actually do a good job in a lot of different fields as well. But especially when you kickstart things, you want to list on certain exchanges. Say you want to list on a few centralized exchanges. Depending on which ones, they come with their own list of. You need to have 100,000 followers at least, or all these weird things that they request. And market makers often, if they are already involved at that stage, can help with this. They have contacts with the exchanges, so they can get you in touch with the right teams. I would actually always recommend to go through either an advisor or a market maker to exchanges, because they probably just do that intro and they step out. Whereas anyone else would be in between and take like a 20K on top of it, because you're talking about a lot of money to list. I think that's also something you want to talk about a lot more, in my opinion, because a lot of people don't know about the expenses of listing your project. I mean, I heard about a project, I think it was 1.5 months ago or something. I don't even know if it's true, but I believe they paid $2.8 million to be listed on Bybit, which is like insane if you think about it. Right, but I've heard the general listing goes over $1 million with exchanges like this, and that of course is split into liquidity, it's split into marketing efforts, it's split into paying the exchange because they want to make money as well. So there's a lot to it, but still it's an expensive thing. So yeah, you want to talk with either a market maker or an advisor or someone at that early stage. Maybe even a VC where they can advise you on like, hey, go with these exchanges, don't go with these necessarily, or do because it needs to fit your project as well. And I guess that's the first step where a market maker could become quite helpful for a project. Then towards the launch, it gets really important that you have a good market maker, because that's when order books needs to be filled. The market maker needs to be ready for when you start launching your token. And basically the days before the launch day, and then especially the few days after the launch day are most often the most crucial time for any project out there. And again, I don't want to talk bad about anyone specifically. I'm not going to name any names, but for example, when you do exchange listings, you have to pay exchanges tokens next to fiat currency. What often the agreement is that tokens are used for liquidity later on by the exchange, etc. We have seen it many times that exchanges actually, as a market maker, a couple hours before the launch, we come in and we're like, okay, let's start filling up the order book. And we open up the backend, the API of the exchange, and we're like, huh, the whole order book is full. What's this? Because nobody besides us should have access to an order book of a token that's not even listed. Because it's not public, and that is often the exchange. So even though the contract of the exchange says they are not allowed to list any tokens before the launch, they do. And what happens, nobody's faster than the exchange on the exchange itself, right? Even a market maker can beat them. So they actually take all the orders. And then if a token goes live, it often spikes up very heavily at the launch, and it liquidates basically into the exchange, and they make a lot of money. Again, I'm not going to name any names, but yeah, we've seen this a lot, and it's unfortunate, right? So you want to have a market maker who is on top of this stuff, who knows that exchanges do this and are not allowed to do it. Recently, we saw a project who had a listing somewhere, and I'm very careful with not mentioning names, but they were listing somewhere on spot, and then apparently they got a free features listing as well, futures listing. Well, that obviously you don't want to do, because what happened is they listed with the futures, and people shorted the living shit out of the token, which of course crashed the entire token and the whole liquidity. So these are things that the market maker should be on top of, right? They should be like, hey, we kind of want to make sure that these things are taken care of before you go live. And if an exchange tells this to you and you're a founder, you're like, oh yeah, sure, another free listing, let's do it. There should be someone telling you don't do it. And then there's many more points like this that come up, right? I mean, as a project, you want to liquidate your own tokens when you launch. There's a lot of volume, there's a lot of buying pressure. You did a lot of marketing, you've built an amazing product most of the time. You need to make some money as well, right? You need to build a treasury to have a couple of years of funds to run your company. You don't want to ditch on your community to make a profit for yourself or anything like that, right? But I think that's very important to explain, because that happens as well. And there's a big difference between the two. And I guess that's where a market maker also comes in, where it says together with the project, like, hey, listen, let's see what happens, let's see what are the price ranges. Let's see how much buying pressure, selling pressure there is. And let's see if along the way, some of the tokens that were in the tokenomics that were published before, we can liquidate a chunk of that for the project treasury to actually give the project some runway without hurting the price, without hurting the uptime momentum of the token, without dumping on the community, so to say, because you're not dumping on them, you're not pushing the price down, you're selling in the buying pressure. Those are strong things to do from a, I would say, market making perspective. Guide projects in that direction, give them a helping hand, show them that that's what's happening, right? And there's many more of these examples. I mean, we can't go through everything, but yeah, there's a lot where a market maker is important to have by your side.
Okay. So Paul, first of all, I feel like this video that we're recording right now is going to go down in crypto history as, hey, every founder just watch this discussion and learn more about it, and at least use that as the start of your journey. We have an epic number of people tuning to watch this. So I'm going to give you all the credit, Paul, because you've got a great community, and it might have started going off when you posted on your own X, but we've got almost 7,000 live viewers watching right now across all our platforms. Wow. Yeah. YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, X. Oscar, is it all X? Like, where are these people coming from? Can we even tell?
I'd say 99.9998 is coming in through X, and we're about to crest 7,000 concurrent viewers.
Yeah. So crypto Twitter is alive and well, I guess. That's where the crypto market used to be. So with that in mind, with so many people here now, I got to give away our code, or people are going to get really annoyed. I'm glad we did it at this point and not like 20 minutes ago when we only had 1,000 viewers. So now there's 7,000 of you that get to hear the code. Go to the Beamable Discord. I know there's now going to be a zillion questions too, like, how do I enter the code? Or like, I didn't know what to do. All right, well, you got to be in our Discord. You have to be registered there. And then it's as simple as type /claim in the Discord and the word I give you. And that's how you earn points. You have to be a member of our community hub as well. All right. The word today is change, CHANGE. If you didn't understand what I was saying, I know we have a lot of people who do not speak English. Just look at the bottom of the screen. It's in the scroller. You can see the word there. Change, CHANGE. You have to enter it live. I have a feeling this is going to get an epic number of replays as well, because anytime we have a lot of live viewers, we get a lot of replays. Okay, listen, you missed out on a little bit of an opportunity to get the code, but you missed out on the bigger opportunity, which is to ask Paul a question, because you got an expert in market making here. And tune in next time, because these are the kind of folks that I like to bring in, real people building or operating companies in the space. Paul, what I'd like to talk about a little bit is this inside baseball aspect of like, what are the business models as well? So if you're a crypto founder and you are going to a market maker, there's two main models that I'm familiar with. There's either what we call the loan option model, and the retainer model would be the other one. And I've seen some hybrid models and stuff out there as well. But could you kind of comment on those two business models, what they look like, and sort of what the risk reward is. And it's more than just risk reward. There's like a lot of things that go into the thought process of which of those will make sense for you as a project team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll try to break it down as simple as possible. I mean, I've been doing that the whole night already, but try to keep it as simple as possible, because I think that's important for a lot of people to understand what we're talking about, right? If you start using a lot of jargon and stuff, it becomes very difficult often. But basically, so as you mentioned, there's two models, and the difference is quite simple. With a retainer model, you as a project are responsible for providing the liquidity. So you provide the tokens and the USDC or USDT, whatever the dollar value to it, for the trading pair on your market making account, so your institutional account on the exchanges where you want to be listed. And we tap into that through the API with our servers, and then we start running the market making. Now, when we do this, the ball is basically in your hands. Obviously, we guide you, we give you, we tell you exactly what we think you should do, what we believe is good for you to do. We're there, every step of the way. But in the end, the project determines what they want to do in terms of how much liquidity they want to put, how much depth they want to put. They do some marketing, things are spiking up. Do you want to push a price up or let it go? Do you want to keep the orders filled heavily so people start selling into that order book and you build treasury, or you want to start, ramping the price up in that way, right? You, as a project, you can determine a lot of different things that are interesting to look at for the health of your own project, the health of your token. Now, to do this, it's very simple. We tap into it. You pay us a retainer fee, meaning you pay an X amount of dollars. I would say this ranges between we are at the lowest end, I think, in the industry, but I would say between $3,500 to $5,000 a month is probably the low end of what market makers charge, to up to $15,000, $20,000 a month, I think, when you go with some of the top tier market makers in the industry. You pay that fee and they basically work for you, right? That's the whole idea. Now, the other side is a loan option agreement. And this basically means is you loan the market maker the tokens. So the market maker gives you the dollars for a loan. They get the tokens for a certain price. And then they basically have the tokens and they also put the dollar value to it. Then they start running they start doing the market making. Now, they're actually doing the market maker in their accounts, not in your account. And that's also where you often don't have the actual nice, congratulations. That's actually where you also don't have a lot of say anymore, which sounds a bit bad, but it's not that bad, into what the market maker is doing, because in the end it's the money of the market maker, right? It's a business. They determine what they do with the money that they have, and that's where a market maker can easily, I don't want to call it malicious, but yeah, they have things in their own hands. And at Reform, we really want to work together with projects, even in those models, to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, what's going to happen. And obviously, there's always a contract that still states, hey, the exchange wants us to have a minimum of $2,000 in a 2% spread at all times. That needs to be there. We make sure that that's always there, because that's a requirement for the contract of the loan, basically, because that's the requirement the project has with the exchange. So of course there is a base layer of this needs to happen in exchange for that loan, but then you don't have much to say anymore about what happens with those tokens, and that's with the market maker. Now, obviously, that loan needs to come back, and I don't want to go too far into the details of that whole structuring, but there's basically strike prices. So when the token goes up or down, there's certain levels that it hits, and based on that, the market maker will pay back the loan. And obviously, if a token goes up very, very much, it's very profitable for the market maker. But then again, they also took the risk of loaning the money for the tokens. So yeah, with a loan option, it puts more risk on the market maker, but the reward can be potentially higher. This is where you hear stories, and I want to be very clear, this is a story, this is a rumor, we don't know the exact numbers, but this is where you hear, for example, a company like Wintimute making $300-400 million profit on a project like Arbitrum as a market maker. Now, again, if that's true or not, I don't want to get any, mad faces at me, but these are stories that you hear a lot in the industry, that market makers can make huge profits. On the other side, when it's a retainer model, that's all with the project. So the only thing the market maker gets is the monthly retainer that's being paid. And then there's, of course, some situations where you're always buying and selling tokens, and you're doing that with an algorithm that's pretty smart. You're doing arbitrage trading between the exchanges, the centralized and the decentralized exchanges even. And in between all those activities, you can always make little bits of profit. Now, if that actually happens, so say, I don't know, we have $100,000 in tokens and $100,000 in dollars. We sold a lot of the dollars and we bought more tokens because the price went down. Then slowly the price starts pushing up again. Eventually you have a balance that is not aligned anymore. It's not 100K and 100K, but it's a lot more tokens, a lot less dollars, so to say. Now what happens is we're going to balance that out without obviously hurting the chart until we're back at that level again. And then if there's excess tokens, so at the end of this whole thing, whenever there's, instead of 100,000, there's actually for $200,000 worth of tokens and $100,000 in dollars, that means there's a profit made on the whole thing. That's where we as a market maker take a small profit share. But it's important to notice that's only on the tokens that are additionally generated by the algorithms that are run, and it's a small percentage.
Right. And then the loan option model, just to kind of drive that point home, I think it comes down to, if you give your market maker, we don't even have to paint this as a nefarious thing. It's just like normal business in some ways. Mm-hmm. If you give your market maker a massive incentive to dump the token because they were able to exercise an option and buy it at a low price, but sell much higher than that, and you give that incentive, who wouldn't do that, right? Like, of course, that's going to be something that happens. And then you basically have made the market maker in that scenario a lot of money, but the token price action may now suffer because they're now unloading it subsequently. Yeah. And this has happened to projects. This isn't just a hypothetical. So something that can happen that founders have to be super aware of when they structure these deals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's important to have good communication with your market maker. At Reform, we really stand for transparency. That's our core focus, or our core value is transparency. And this goes a long way in all the different aspects here. And I think everything went to mute, touch didn't turn out well. That happens as well from time to time. But then again, you're not sure how that goes with market makers, because you have no idea which projects they're actually doing. You don't know where they're involved, etc. And I think, it's also fair enough to say, I think the founder of Intermute, I forgot his name. I'm bad with names. If you're watching, sorry. I don't think the founder of Intermute is watching, but if you're watching, sorry for that. He's a well-known guy. He was a speaker, I think, in Token in Singapore. And he was actually asked, like, market maker, how is this going? And he basically said, listen, we're a business. Like, I'm not doing this because I'm a charity organization for your project. If I can make money, I make money, right? I give you a service, I make money. It's a business. So he's very straightforward in this, which kind of you have to respect as well. It's like, yeah, of course, it's your business.
So beware being a buyer, really. So meaning the crypto project, like, understand the risks and who you're in business with and what their historical patterns are, and the actual terms on things like the option agreement. I've heard of lots of founders that just sort of sign anything. They don't even know what they're getting into, and then there's a bad result. Crypto is asking, won't vesting be a defense? I mean, I think the answer is it can be. Like, vesting can help, right? That's one of the things that you can do.
Yeah, but your market maker is, of course, never vested because he needs to be liquid. So you can't have a market maker on vesting, right? That's just...
I have seen market making deals where you give them some tokens and there's a vesting schedule on that, or a schedule on when they can exercise. Options are not immediately exercisable.
Yeah, that could be. So obviously there's a lot of hybrid models in the industry, right? There's projects that want to do a retainer model but don't have a lot of cash on hand, and then they do a retainer with partly cash, partly tokens, and those tokens are vested. But then it's merely the token being a payment for the service, rather than, if a market maker gives you money for a loan to do your market making, those tokens, of course, cannot be vested because that doesn't make sense. But as I said, there's a lot of hybrid models out there. A lot of market makers are trying to find an edge towards how they can do this. We're actually building a third model ourselves as well. I won't say too much about it yet, but it's going to be pretty interesting, in my opinion. And again, the whole idea is to be transparent, to be ethical, and to get to the stage where, yes, we're a company, we want to make money, but also, yes, we're here to help you as a project. Right? That's the whole reason why Reform was created. That's why we have a DAO structure. That's why, that everything we do for a specific reason. And I don't want to do a 10-minute rant on what Reform is and how it works. You can read all about that when you check out our page.
You can do the 1 or 2 minute rant as we come up on the hour, and just sort of like we've just covered what market making is, a lot of the problems, the different business models. Like, at least share with us, like, what is your approach at Reform DAO that sort of addresses any of what we've covered?
Yeah, absolutely. We spoke a lot about, what could go wrong with a market maker. And I think that's also where Reform was, when Reform was launched, it's launched by people that have been in traditional finance, in institutional crypto for a long time, running the biggest funds in Europe, etc. And they were really looking at what's going wrong for a lot of projects or in the industry in general, and what can we do to help there. And that's when they came to market making. And they started looking into, what can we do here? We have the knowledge, we have the teams. How can we build this out? And eventually that made Reform from a perspective of how can we create a solution to something that most project founders experience as a problem in the industry. Which, it's weird you have to say it like that, but it's unfortunately the truth. Most project founders you speak with are not happy with their market maker. And whatever the reason was, the details are the details, but it's unfortunate that that's the case. I guess where Reform drives the difference here is what I already mentioned, right? It's transparency. So we stand for transparency, we stand for accessibility, and we stand for equitability. And basically it all comes down as like, hey, we want to make sure that we do everything as fair and as open as possible. We want to guide everyone through that entire process, project founders. We want to be accessible for projects to reach out to us, to work with us. Once the company grows, there will be a lot of grants and stuff to also help smaller projects out with loan options and things like this. But also for individuals, right? Market making is a behind closed doors industry. Nobody knows market makers. They can't own shares of a market maker. It all goes to a small group of shareholders who own the companies. With Reform, by owning the Reform token, in the long run, you can get exposure to the revenue model of a market maker. So that's also quite unique in the industry, right? Mm-hmm. And Reform basically works is we decided to go with a DAO structure because whenever we make profits on the market making, whether it's loan option, when it's retainer, whatever we do, it goes actually to the DAO treasury rather than going to our pockets. And I think that's also a key thing for a lot of projects out there. And there's so many side notes to this, right? If our option ends after a year, a loan option, we pay back the loan and we still have 1 million tokens left or 100 million tokens left, whatever the amount is. A lot of market makers could say, okay, sure, profit, sell it, done. We have money in the bank. We actually would never sell those tokens, but we put them in our DAO treasury as well. Now, what do we do with the money in the DAO treasury? Of course, on one hand, there is the side where we do the loan options with the funds which are in the treasury. But on the other hand, it's also that we do the high frequency trading that I said earlier. And with the high frequency trading that we do, we are liquidity provision. We're doing liquidity provision for the exchanges. We create volume on decentralized exchanges, and they pay us rebates for doing those volumes. And those rebates we see as profits. Now, 65% of those profits go to buying back our own token from the public exchanges and locking those for 1 to 5 years in our bonding treasury. So basically within our ecosystem, 35% is to pay the operational costs. I mean, we all like to have a salary still. It's not a charity still, but basically it's just to cover the operational costs. And eventually with the buybacks that are happening, with the lockups that are happening, the bigger this treasury becomes, the bigger the buybacks become, which eventually results in the token price going up significantly over time, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking 5 years, 10 years from now. And that's where, of course, the incentive is, because that's what the next question is for most people. Where's the incentive for the team? Why would you do this if you're not a charity? Well, mm-hmm. There is incentive, but it's really focused on building something long-term that is sustainable, that is healthy, and then eventually it will come. So yeah, that's very shortly explained the Reform ecosystem, what we stand for.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Market making. Yeah.
So I think we're going to try to cram in one more question before we wrap up the hour. I feel like we could have gone 3 hours in this conversation because there's so much to cover. But
next week.
had a much earlier question about like AI decision making, whether it opens up new attack surfaces. I guess I'll just broaden the question. Like, what is the role of AI in market making, and what are some of the risks that you might think of? Maybe not necessarily in this particular risk category.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of it, right? Let's start by understanding that what we call AI might not always be AI, but just a supercomputer, right? And it learns itself, maybe whatever. But it's just computers are getting, quantum computing, etc. It's super fast, super smart. That on top with actual AI, there's a lot of different areas where an AI makes an impact. For example, what we do is we utilize the AI to train the algorithms that we have, and we still do so. For the algorithms to put the grids more accurate towards where we believe the market will move. And we're talking really about dollar movements in Bitcoin, which, with historical data, accurate data, news data, etc., allows the algorithm to determine, hey, the price is probably moving up, it's moving down, it's moving up, it's moving down. And based on that, quote in a way that it drives small percentages of additional profit for us. So, that's where, of course, AI can be used. But then on the other side, market making on that side is a lot of algorithms fighting with each other to be the fastest. So there's a lot of AI being used to also train algorithms to read other algorithms, to counter those. And there's a lot of, I can do a whole hour on that side as well, on how malpractice in algorithmic battles is happening, like behind the scenes. You sometimes see projects there's certainly, $100 of volume every day, and then suddenly there's $400,000 in one day. And that could just be one market maker trying to trick the algorithms of other market makers to put orders in the book that are not realistic or something, because it did something weird. You go into a lot of details there, but it's super interesting. So yeah, AI is of course very much present in all of this, and it could be a force of good and a force of bad depending on how you look at it.
All right, Paul, great point to end on. We'll have to have you back at some point, because this was so interesting, and maybe the next one will be an even deeper dive on some of that stuff. But I hope this was super interesting to everybody. I trust it is, because we've got almost 15,000 concurrent watching this across the platforms, although we think it's mostly X. I don't, we haven't gotten to that. That's like a 10X number over our last high watermark. So thank you all for tuning in today. We really, really appreciate it. It's a topic that seems to be really interesting to folks. So we definitely will use that feedback in my own, like, not AI, but actual brain incentive matrix, and be like, maybe these are the kind of topics people want to hear about. So we'll cover more of this. I just want to really super thank Paul too for joining this and having me as a guest a few times on Paul's Penthouse. That was a lot of fun. We'll keep these going. And until next time, folks, really glad you tuned into this. We're going to keep having more conversations like this with crypto founders, executives, market makers, exchanges, AI companies, game developers, Web3 and Web2. So that's what I like to do, like meet with people who are really building things. And that's what's exciting to talk about. And if you're interested in who's building stuff and the way they're thinking about problems, you found me here. That's what I love to talk about. Really appreciate you following me, as well as Beamable and Beamable Network, as we move towards our own TGE a little bit later this year. So thanks, Paul. This has been a lot of fun.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Paul.
All right. Till